Om Amriteshwaryai Namaha. Om Amriteshwaryai Namaha. Om Amriteshwaryai Namaha. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvamanusantatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravinda Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharatailapurnaha Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapane Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsya Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Namaskar. After a long break, we're resuming. And we are in chapter 15. No, just kidding. We are still in chapter 3. Yeah. Like I said in the beginning, we're not in a rush. This is not fast food. This is supposed to be spiritual sustenance, and that is not something that you necessarily get quickly. So we will take it slow and very steadily. So last time, 2 times ago, I talked about the overall structure of chapter 3, and I'll just review the key points of that. There are about 5 sections in this chapter 3 that we can be mindful of. As an introduction, which starts with Arjuna's questions. He, starts off, we already covered those questions, that was the last class. And those questions evoked a response from Krishna, which is what we're going to hear today. Most of that response we're going to hear today. And he basically explains why one must do actions in life. And so it's an introduction to that subject, and he basically says no matter who you are, even if you're a sannyasi, you still have to do some kind of activity. So the only choice, like we talked about last time, was that there's a choice between the kind of lifestyle you live. Not a question of whether you do actions or not. It's a question of what kind of lifestyle you live. Are you going to be a householder? Are you going to be a renunciate living in an ashram or something like that? Either way, the path or the progression is the same. You purify yourself, you acquire inner maturity, and then you dedicate yourselves entirely to God and then achieve realization, hopefully before leaving this body. So he has to tell Arjuna there's no question of which one is better. There's a progression, and that's what he should be focused on. So the second part, that first part goes up to verse 7. Second part starts from 8 and goes to the first half of verse 20. And that he talks about the main details of karma yoga. And one commentator has explained it very concisely as being proper action or healthy action with a healthy attitude. Proper action with a proper attitude. We'll get into that later. And the third part, he takes what might seem like a digression, but also is helpful to show the ultimate destination when you're walking the path of Karma Yoga, which is of course the title of this chapter, which is the state of a realized being. He did talk about that in the second chapter, and he's going to talk about the quote-unquote duties, even though they don't have any duties, just what type of life they lead and what qualities they will have, a realized being. So somebody who has achieved perfection, having started with Karma Yoga, what does their life and what do they look like? That goes up to the first half of verse 20. And then from, that goes from the second half of verse 20 up to verse 29. And then from verse 30 to 35 is again a summary of Karma Yoga and its significance. So he comes back to Karma Yoga. And the final section is verse 36 to 43. And Arjuna asks Krishna a question, which is something we might all find very interesting, because he says, what are the obstacles to doing Karma Yoga? Typically, we all struggle. When I was in Amritapuri last month, that was one of the main things that they asked me to give they asked me to hold classes for the Westerners and the renunciates there. So the main question they said is, we want people to have a class on how to maintain their enthusiasm, because it's difficult for people living in an ashram for many years to maintain their enthusiasm. And so this is a subject that people want to know. What are the obstacles on the path, and how does one resolve them? So that's the last topic that Krishna talks about. So with that review of chapter 3, let us move on and pick up where we left off. I'm assuming we left off at verse 3. I hope I'm not in the wrong time zone. And we will read that together. You can repeat after me. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Lokesmin Dvividha Nishta Pura Prokta Mayanagha Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam. All right. Maybe find somebody who's not read yet. Maybe they can read for us.
We don't have a mic tonight.
Okay. Who has not read yet? Amy, did you read? Just in a loud so everyone can hear.
The Blessed Lord said, as expounded by me of old, O blameless one, there are in this world two paths, the yoga of knowledge for men of contemplation, and the yoga of action for men of action.
Okay. Each time I clarify, this is the Indian translation of things. Sometimes unnecessarily they use the masculine case, but this is from the ashram, so we're using and sort of forgiving that. So this is a very famous verse. It is quoted by Shankaracharya very, very frequently, and so we should all sort of remember this one. And he says pura, which means that this is something, he says of old in our translation of this ashram version says of old. It also has been translated to mean in the origin, in the beginning. So in other words, it means that in multiple occasions during the Gita, Krishna refers to himself as the teacher that taught something a long time ago. So, and Arjuna even asks him at one point, how can it be that you taught this He said he taught it to Manu, who was like at the beginning of creation. How can you teach it? Because you're alive now, So Krishna has to tell him, hey, look, it's not the body I'm talking about, So if Amma were to say, I taught this to Gautama Rishi back in the Vedic days, you would be like, what? So she went, no, not this body, I am that supreme being that teaches this to everybody, basically. That's what Krishna is saying. So in the origin, whenever that was, or even if we could just say a long time ago, maybe in the Vedic days, he taught it to the rishis who realized these teachings in their meditations. So he's that pure consciousness that through which we all realize the truth. So anybody who realizes the truth is realizing it through Krishna or through the Atman. That's what he means in the days of old. And he says the two-fold path. I think they have translated slightly different here, but the way I learned it was that we should call it twofold because really there are not two paths. In fact, that is the whole purpose of this verse, is to emphasize the fact that there are not two paths. It's a twofold. It's a single path with phases, right? It's two phases, two steps in one path. So he's emphasizing that. And so we talk about two paths. I know we're under the impression there are four paths and everything, etc. This yoga, that yoga. But he's talking about, and he's going to talk about the difference between action and knowledge, right? So he's not saying that these are different paths and that you can choose one over the other, because he just, that's the whole point of this section, is to say that you don't choose one over the other. They have different roles to play in spiritual life. So, we say, okay, is it only action and knowledge? What about devotion? Is that not even included? And what we could say about devotion is that devotion has to be there pervading everything. You don't say, like, I do my actions with devotion, but when I get self-knowledge, I'm not going to have devotion. We should understand that devotion is pervading everything. Every action we perform, there should be an attitude of surrender. How can you have karma yoga without devotion with some higher power? What do you surrender to? When the results come and they're not to your expectation, you're going to be upset. So you have to surrender to something. What do you surrender to? Like this amorphous, black hole? There has to be some, object of our devotion that we surrender to when those unexpected things happen. And same with knowledge. Even Shankaracharya himself has said that the path of bhakti is inquiring into one's own true nature, right? So one who is pursuing the path of, or one who is immersed in devotion should understand that actually his devotion ultimately is going to reach himself. There's nowhere else to go but yourself. But initially we start off with the feeling of separation. So then also at the same time, our pursuit of deeper self-understanding, we should understand that as a kind of devotion, right? So devotion is pervasive through everything. So another point about calling this teaching a teaching of old is that it's not a new teaching. So if somebody comes and says, I've got this great teaching, it's a new thing, it's my own thing, I came up with it myself, I'm going to copyright it, you just be mindful, because Krishna himself didn't claim the copyright of the teaching either. So that shows the way a teacher really should be. He often refers that this is a teaching that's been there from a long time, etc. So he's, some of the teachings that he speaks are actually came first in the Upanishads. So it's not plagiarism. He's also, attributing it to the source. Of course, he himself is the source also, but humbly saying this is a teaching that's been there for some time. So he pays homage to the tradition as well. So this is how a real saint or a real master would be. Amma always pays homage to the tradition, even though she herself is giving it a new twist in the modern day. So everything is already there. And he is just reviving it in the modern day, which was for him 5,200 years ago. That was modern back then. And just like Buddha revived the tradition when people were forgetting it before him, Krishna revived the tradition when people were forgetting it. This is said to be the beginning of Kali Yuga, when Krishna came. At the time of the Mahabharata war, the tradition says that that's when Kali Yuga, or the age of materialism, began. So if that's true, that means that he knew there was going to be, this is the war was that dark beginning, and it was a sad time, right? So he had to give an important message for the sake of all these people who are coming later, like us. So it was a key, pivotal point. So again, even though Arjuna in the first two verses says, Krishna, please tell me clearly which one is higher, Again, Krishna is telling him two. So it must have been a little maddening, you go to Amma, I told you that question I asked Amma, and one of the first times I met her, I said, which path should I do? Should I go to law school or should I join the military? This was my question to Amma. And she just laughed and she said, whatever you choose, Amma is going to be with you. It's like a non-answer, you think, I want you to tell me which one to do. But what I found out later is that Amma her job is not to answer mechanically and just say A or B. She wants to teach me to think deeper and so I can understand how to choose what is right and what is wrong. Not just every time I run back and say, is it A or B? She wants us to learn how to do it. That means she wants to be a teacher, not just like an advisor. If you want to be an advisor, you can do that. You can be a, economic advisor or this advisor, whatever, and then every time someone has a problem, they'll come and ask you opinions. But in the case of a realized master, that's not in their interest because they want us to become independent, ultimately. That's their goal, is to teach us to become completely independent of them even. So that's why Krishna also didn't just command Arjuna. He could have said, do this, and then go do it and come back later, That would have been the end of the Gita. It would have been like 2 lines long, So he didn't do that. He teaches him and he says, okay, he's guiding him how to come to these conclusions himself so that he'll be more mature. It's like what Amma does for the people who don't have work. She doesn't just give them money. She gives them vocational training. She gives them self-help groups and microloans and things like that so that they understand how to help themselves. It's very key. So a real master will always do that. They won't just give people, a simple solution. They want to guide them. That's why last time, I think it was, I told you that old saying, which is, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. What's the other half? Teaching the fish, and you can eat for a lifetime. Right. There's another version of that, which is kind of the modern day one. Give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. Teach him how to fish and you can get rid of him for a whole weekend. This is for all the wives who find their husbands are a little too overbearing maybe in the house. But the point is, instead of solving their problem for them, teach them how to solve the problem for themselves. That's what Krishna is trying to do. Because Arjuna had already misunderstood that one yoga was supposed to be better than the other. And he just wants to know which one is better, If you go out and you say, like, I want to buy a laptop, is it this brand or that brand? Which one is better? That's an easy question. But Krishna is saying it's not that kind of a thing. They're both essential parts of a singular process. So there's no option between the two. Everybody has to go through karma yoga first, do a lot of action for the purpose of, what was it? Purification. And then the only way to remove ignorance is through understanding or knowledge. So that's the purpose of learning about the self, or what they call jnana yoga. So another analogy that's sometimes given is that when you're thirsty, you want to drink water. You don't want to, like, kiss the glass. right? You don't want to touch your lips to the glass necessarily. What you really want is water. So if someone brings you a glass of water and you say, I don't want the glass, I only want the water. It's a nonsensical statement, because first you need the glass, and then it's indirectly necessary for the sake of quenching your thirst. So like that action, the path of action, or the field of action, is indirectly necessary for acquiring self-knowledge. And it's indispensable, so there's no question of saying, do I need it or not? Some people say, I think it was Krishnamurti, J. Krishnamurti, sometimes was encouraging people in his writings that you don't need to do action. I've never read it, actually, I don't know. This is what some people told me. And one person asked, why do we need to do action? All we need is self-knowledge. So we just forsake action and just go straight to self-knowledge. And then Amma said, look, somebody may have told you that, but that's like a person using a ladder, climbing to the roof and saying, you don't need the ladder. He's already on the roof. For him, it's easy to say that. And that saint that wrote the commentary that I talk about, Jnaneshwari, so Jnanadev, he also said that, it's easy for a guy on the other side of the river to say you don't need the boat to come across, because he's already there. But when you're on the other side of the river, you need the boat. So when you're on this side of the river, which is duality, you need purification to get to the state where you can really understand what non-duality is about. So people should not be misled saying you don't need the field of action, or you don't need action to get self-knowledge. So Krishna is, over and over again emphasizing the importance of action to Arjuna, because why? Why would anybody emphasize the importance of action to somebody else, to your disciple?
Because they're not fully mature.
Right. That means he needs purification, right? Oh, you're going to say?
I was just going to say discipline too. So.
Yeah, he needs discipline. He needs... discipline can be also acquired through worship as well. So it's generally we would say he needs purification, because that's what the action does. And so in each verse he's giving Arjuna one more reason why he has to continue doing his duty actions. And because Arjuna was saying, why are you forcing me to fight? I don't want to do this. And he's saying, look, you have to do this for these reasons. But in the Upanishads, if you read in the Upanishads, the gurus, what are they? Has anybody read? Do you remember what it says? The gurus teach the disciples to give up the world. They say, give up the world and just be a renunciate. So what does that tell you about the disciples who we encounter in the Upanishads versus Arjuna? They were much more mature. They had already completed that process of purification, and they were ready for renunciation. That's why some of these scriptures start off with that word that I talked about previously, atha, now kama, and they teach after that. So it means you've already acquired inner purification, inner purity. So now it's okay for me to teach you this in teaching, which I'm about to start. So it assumes that the inner purification has already been completed. So another beautiful example of this, has anybody read the story of Mirabai? Of course, we have one Mirabai here. We can hear her story. But there's also the Mirabai who gave fame to that name hundreds of years ago. Anybody know her story? What was she doing? Was she a renunciate? Was she a business person? Was she?
She was a princess.
She was a princess. Okay.
She was made to marry.
She was made to marry.
But
She loved Krishna.
And sang devotionally.
Yeah, she
All
was
the ways to Krishna.
completely
She hung
immersed
out
in.
with all the sadhus and it
Right.
irritated the family. She got herself
Got herself in trouble, right?
People tried to kill her. And
Okay.
it never worked.
Right, so did you know that she actually sought advice from Tulsi Das? This is how the story runs. Tulsi Das, I guess, was a contemporary of her. And she sought his advice on her duty. What's my duty? Because I'm married to this guy. I'm totally not interested. All I think about is Krishna. I just want to merge in Krishna. What should I do? So what do you think Tulsi Das told her? Because this is a tough question, right? You have to be a very wise person to give the proper advice in a situation like that. Anybody know or want to guess what he said? He said, kind of an evasive response, but maybe it sounds kind of like something that Amma might say, which was, in the path of spirituality, if our closest relative creates obstacles, we should consider them our worst enemy. Now, that is advice you don't give to somebody who's a casual seeker, right? They'll say, oh, great, that's my enemy, now I'll go watch movies, Mirabai was a very rare soul. So he spoke those words to her, knowing that she was like on fire with devotion. So anybody who prevents that, they're just going to burn in that fire anyhow. It's going to be miserable for both of them. So he gave his tacit approval to her devoting herself entirely to Krishna. Whether she left or not, I don't remember, but she didn't stop devoting herself to Krishna, that's for sure. So now if Arjuna had asked Tulsidas the same question, Tulsidas would have said, hey, no way, you gotta do, what you gotta do, because that's what Krishna told him. So obviously we know Arjuna was not a Mirabai. He was much more immature than she was. So the fact is that most people are not prepared. Very, 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 very few people are fully mature and prepared. In the modern day, we have, maybe 2 people who were born with that preparation, and they're the ones that are often quoted by the lazy people. Who are they? People who are cited by the lazy people. Who would they be? Modern day saints who didn't do any detectable sadhana really. Ramana Maharishi and? Nisargadatta Maharaj, right. So if you don't want to do sadhana, it's nice, your mind will latch onto these guys and say, they didn't do sadhana. But if you know anything about Amma, she will say, look, if I don't meditate, my disciples are going to become lazy and stop meditating. That's why I meditate. She doesn't say that these days. She used to say that. So if she doesn't do work, if she doesn't do these things, we're all going to become lazy. And Krishna even says that very shortly in the Gita. So even though both action and deepening one's understanding of the true self, jnana, even though both are necessary, the sages and the scriptures recognize that there are 2 lifestyles. Remember we talked about that. It's okay to choose your lifestyle. You can't say whether you're going to do action or not, but you can decide what type of lifestyle you're going to live. And those lifestyles we talked about are, anybody know the Sanskrit word for them? They're called something something ashrama. What did you said it. You had it. What was it? Grahastha-ashrama. And then, what's the one that's different from that? Sorry? Close. It's based on that. You all know it. You're just not putting it into place here, that's all. Sannyasa-ashrama. There's no question of a grihastha being a sannyasi. I mean, you can say grihastha sannyasi, that's a concept though. It doesn't mean you're really a grihastha sannyasi. All right? It's not like you get married and put on ochre robes and then start having kids and things like that. It means you're choosing one or the other. So a grihastha can later, after finishing their duties, can become a sannyasi. But that's in a progression. When they're done with their grihastha duties, householder duties, then they can do it. So, yes?
I recently had a statement very that
I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Then you can ask your question after that if it remains unanswered. So we know, and this is kind of the background to what she was about to say. We know there are actually 4 ashramas. Ashram means like a stage of life, basically. It also means a monastery, right? Hermitage. But in this case, it means a stage in life. So what are those 4 stages? You guys, we've covered them here multiple times. You should know them by now. There's 4. That's the first one. Okay, first you're in brahmacharya ashrama, right? Then, what's the second one? Grihastha ashrama, right? Vanaprastha, sannyasa. Okay. Why can we boil these 4 down to 2? How do we do that? Why is it not 4? It's actually pretty rad.
First 3 have to do with action. The last 3 is...
Last 3? There's 6?
I mean the last one.
Okay. It's pretty much it. The first one is universal. Everybody's born a brahmachari, right? Right? I don't know if anybody was born already married. That's then, born already having kids, You're neuter when you're born, basically, except for the fact that you have a body that fits one or the other gender. You wouldn't know the difference when you're born. So all that stuff comes later. So we are all brahmacharis at birth, so we don't even talk about that. It's just a question of whether you stop being one or not. So then, either you get married or you don't get married, right? So if you get married, then the question is, what do you do after that? But let's say from being a brahmachari, you go directly to sannyasa, to renunciation. Is vanaprastha ashrama relevant for you? Vanaprastha means, well, those of you who know, just answer that question. Is that relevant for... No, it's not. It's only for grahasthas. So now I'm going to put this in normal English, right? Because we're using a lot of Sanskrit words. So you start off as a celibate monk, basically. A celibate student, up to age 20. That's what a brahmachari is, a celibate student. Some people remain brahmacharis their whole life, actually. And they're not even yet sannyasis. Like, for example, I think Narendra Modi is a Naishtika brahmachari. He was married, but that was just a, formality. They never actually lived together. He doesn't have any kids. Yeah. Same with Vajpayee. He was a Naishtika brahmachari. And Advani, I think he was, some of these people who are the RSS or whatever members, some of them never got married. I think a lot of them. I'm not sure which ones. I'm pretty sure it was Advani and Vajpayee. So these are examples of people who just remain brahmacharis until old age. Now, most people at age 20 in the old days would get married. So then you become a grahastha. Means you have a house. You're established in the house, grahastha, right? So you do that until age 55, 60 or whatever, and then by that time, they would have had kids earlier in those days. The kid's 30 years old by the time you're 50, or by the time you're 55. So when he's 30 years old, he doesn't need you anymore, probably. So you can slowly relinquish your roles in the world and hand it over to your kids. And then that's where you start the next phase of married life, which is vanaprastha, which means you're no longer established in the house, you're established in the forest. Which means you recede from worldly life and you reflect on those spiritual teachings you learned when you were young, and you try to get back into that same mood so that you prepare yourself for leaving the body or ultimate renunciation. So those middle two, householder life and forest life, are like two sides of the same entity. It's only relevant for someone who's a householder. But there are some people who jump from being a celibate student to just being a full renunciate, sannyasi. So at age 20, they would have just taken ochre robes and lived in an ashram for the rest of their life, in the old days. So in Amma's ashram, examples of that are the senior swamis who are wearing ochre robes, We're brahmacharis technically still. So those, however many there was, about 10, I believe. So they did that. You know, they went from being a student to being a Swami or Swamini, like the ex-Saumya. She used to be called Saumya from Australia. Now she's Krishnamrita Prana. So very few people are actually prepared like that. So the two lifestyles are these, and each one is more conducive to one type of sadhana over the other. So if you're a householder, it's pretty obvious. What type of sadhana is easier for you to do, action or the pursuit of self-knowledge? Action. You can't survive as a householder without doing actions. You can't say, call your boss, sorry, I'm not coming to work today, I'm going to read the Upanishads. You know, say, fine, you don't have to come you have a long reading session, you don't have to come anymore. You know, you can read as much as you want. You're fired. So that's how householder life is. You have to do action. And conversely, if you're living in an ashram, full-time, say like Amrita Puri, you know, you don't really have a quote-unquote workplace. Everything is a place for sadhana. Everything you're doing is supposed to be sadhana, even though we turn it into work mentally somehow. It's supposed to be only sadhana. So you don't get the exposure to the same type of circumstances that you would in the world. It's not a place that you go to have relationships and have children. Some people take their children there, you know, etc. But it's not a place that you go to have a, you know, romantic relationship. So you're very limited in the kind of circumstances you can create in an ashram. So it's not designed for activity, even though there's lots of activity in Amma's ashram. That's not the ultimate purpose of it. So Krishna is saying here that the path of a householder is more conducive to karma yoga, or activity, purifying yourself through activity. Or if you need to purify yourself through activity, the path of a householder is better for you. That's what he's saying. And he's saying, and if you are in the stage where you want to immerse yourself or need to immerse yourself in knowledge, the pursuit of self-knowledge, this path of renunciation is better for you. That's what he's saying. He's saying it's just a question of which lifestyle you're going to choose. That's the only choice you have. And he also says that one is a little more conducive to the other. Doesn't mean that you can't as a householder, you cannot pursue self-knowledge. Or it doesn't mean as a renunciate an ashram, you cannot purify yourself through action. It's possible. It's just that each one has a primary objective. So Amma's given an example. She says, if you want to cut a banana, you can do it with a screwdriver. It's not impossible to do it with a screwdriver. You know, and then you can screw in a screw with a knife, somehow. It might break the knife in the process, but you can do it. It's just that it wasn't designed for that, that's all. So like that, in the ashram, people sometimes want to be immersed in activity, they want to start relationships, they want to have boyfriend, girlfriend, they want to have a business in the ashram and everything, and they suffer so much because the ashram is not designed for that. I'm talking mostly about Amrita Puri. You know, it's not a place where you go to start a romantic relationship. And also, you know, in the world, if you want to immerse yourself only in study of scriptures and meditation, well, if you have 3 kids, it's not easy, you know. I don't have to have kids to know that. People tell me, you know, they don't get time. So this is the obvious truth, that if we already know what we want to focus on, which path fits is relatively clear. So this is now the answer to the question that Marla was about to ask, which is that there are 3 possibilities, and Krishna and Amma also basically says the same thing. Just choose one of the 3 and stick with it. That's all you have to do. Choose one of the 3 and stick with it. But there's a progression in each one, and you just follow that. So everybody starts off as a celibate student, right? So forget about that. We're not going to even talk about that. So after being a celibate student, you get married, whatever age. You focus on purifying yourself through action. Once your mind becomes pure, then you just drop everything. Maybe you do that vanaprastha, you remove yourself gradually and spend some time in a place like MA Center Chicago, remove yourself from the world, and then you just completely renounce everything and focus only on the pursuit of self-knowledge, and you become liberated. Sound good? All right, that's one option. Option 2, after being a celibate student, you get married, purify your mind through actions, right? This is the same. But then you continue as a householder, right? You live in your house, but you basically convert your house into an ashram, right? You stay there, everything is the same, but you just turn your house into an ashram and make it completely all about, self-knowledge, because your mind is ready for it. Some people do that. Even some of Amma's devotees, their houses just basically become the de facto center in that city. They're always crawling with spiritual seekers and they have no privacy, and it's basically they're an itinerant resident where everybody else is there too. So that way you can also attain liberation if you make your house into an ashram. And you basically renounce inside your house, which is basically no longer your house anymore. So the third option is you become you're a celibate student, and you go from there directly to renunciation of the world, which is what, like we said, the senior swamis who travel with Amma and who also stay in India, these people are examples of that. They never had that intermediary phase of being a householder. And because they went directly to renunciation, they have a limited field of exposure to experiences in the world. So you can't go through that process of what is it like to raise a child, what do you learn from that, what kind of maturity you get from having a spouse. They don't have that exposure. They have to get whatever remaining lessons they need through a more controlled environment. That's all it is. So basically, what Amma has said is that it means you got a lot of exposure in a previous life, and this year, this lifetime, you didn't need it, or you didn't want it, whatever it is. It didn't happen. You're getting it through a different type of exposure. Anyhow, we know that all the married people ultimately say we're like brother and sister now, and then it's not like we're even like husband and wife. So that's where you end up anyhow. So Arjuna's path was clear. He had to do his duty as a prince and fight the war without running away. So even if you go straight to renunciation, I'm giving a lot of explanation to this verse because it's a very important verse. Even if you go straight to renunciation in ashram, like someone like me, what I did there, I just lived as a brahmachari there long term. There's no escape from action. That's the point. That's Krishna's going to make even more clear in the verses to come. Even if you go to Amritapuri, the first thing they're going to do is give you a seva assignment. They're not going to say, this is your meditation assignment. They're going to say, this is your seva assignment. You have to do some kind of work here in this ashram. Amma prohibits people from living there without doing work, in fact. You have to do work, unless you're handicapped or something like that. So you may have a particular type of lifestyle where you don't get married, but you still have to work. You still need purification. And if you go beyond and you don't need the purification anymore, it'll happen naturally, Amma says. The work will just fall away on its own. You don't have to push it away. It'll just happen naturally. And at that time, you should not be possessive of your role and your work, right? No, I'm in charge of this. I'm not going to let go of this role. That means you're not ready anyhow. So if it just falls away and you drop it, you say, okay, it's time to let go of that. Okay, that's a sign that you have the maturity and the purity, and you don't need to do it anymore. Most of us fail that test whenever it comes. So, also, the last thing I want to say before we move on to the next verse is that, we should not oversimplify this, thinking that one fine day all action is going to fall away and we're just suddenly going to be immersed in the pursuit of self-knowledge and we're going to be this great wise being. because it doesn't happen really like that, at least not as far as I've seen. That purification process is gradual, and in the same way, our kind of conversion more to a path of knowledge is also, the pursuit of knowledge is also very gradual. So until, we are 100% immersed in that, which may not even be this birth, until that time, there's always going to be some fluctuation in our life, and what we will try to do is, whenever the mind is conducive and allows us to pursue more deep subjects and to contemplate on our true nature, then we should be doing that. Typically that means the morning. The morning hours are the best time to really do that reflection on the meaning of life, your purpose, who you really are, all the subjects related to self-knowledge. It's not easy to do after lunch, or at 11 o'clock at night when you're already tired. So depending on the mood and the cooperativeness of your mind, if it's not being cooperative, that's a good time to go out and do some work, be active, go take a walk, or do something where you have to move and either exhaust the rajas or create rajas to overcome tamas, one or the other. So throughout the day we can observe our mental state and choose which sadhana we're going to use at that time. All right, now let us go to verse 4. Na karmanam anarambhan naishkarmyam purushosnute purushosnute na cha sanyasanad eva siddhim samadhigacchati. Okay. Someone else who has not read yet? Anybody? Jim. Okay, Divyanand.
Verse 4, not by abstaining from action does a man achieve non-action, nor by mere renunciation does he attain to perfection.
Okay, great. So this is what we need to hear when we're trying to shirk. One of the things we need to hear when we're trying to shirk away from some kind of action. Typically what happens, and this happens in ashrams all the time, and it happens in workplaces too. You do something, some kind of quote-unquote seva, but actually your attitude was not really pure. You had some attachment. Typically you don't even know what your attachment is. You wanted to be praised, you didn't want to be scolded, you wanted it to come out well, you didn't want it to be a failure. Whatever you wanted, the opposite thing happened. And then people say, oh, what is the point of doing all this seva? Why am I even doing this? That's it, I'm not doing this anymore. You do it, fine. We all do this at one point or another. You try to do something and someone says, that's a horrible way of doing it. What are you doing? Never seen something so dumb. And you say, well, fine, you do it. I mean, this is typical response. Knee-jerk reaction. That's not seva. That is just work. That's a sign that we had the wrong attitude. So we're throwing away the action, thinking that, okay, I'm not going to do it. And Krishna is saying, you're not going to do what? Means you're going to do something, whatever it is. It's impossible for you to just stop doing things like that just by dropping it. You don't achieve actionlessness just by dropping action. See what I mean? So in this case, actionlessness refers to perfection. And the second half of the verse even says perfection. So it means that whatever the lifestyle we choose, whatever you're doing, we still have to do action. It's a stepping stone to inaction. We're going to talk about that later on, what that means. So desire-less action is the means to achieve true actionlessness. If you want to achieve that state of being beyond action, the only way to do it is to start with actions without any desires. And if you want to know whether you had a desire, just see what happens when the results come. Especially when people criticize you and say things like that. We immediately bulge up like a frog, and then we react, right? So there's like the big toad of your ego come, blah, blah, you know. And then to everybody else, it's so obvious. It's like you just go like that. And they're like, oh my gosh, look at that ego reaction. You know, and then, we're so busy being the toad that we don't realize, you know, like the cat with its back, like that. You go into like angry cat mode, and then you're so identified with that, you don't realize that your ego is so obvious to everybody else. Especially when you have two cats going like that, it's just like neither one has any clue, and everyone else is out. The cats are fighting again. You know, everybody can see it. So, desireless action means you don't react when people say things to you. That's the key thing. It means you just say, okay, anyhow, I wasn't doing this for the sake of having everybody bow down and do pada puja to me. That's not why I was doing this. Let's say you were decorating the stage and someone said, God, that looks horrible. You know, and you just spent like 3 hours doing it. You know, and you were thinking, oh, Amma, this is for you the whole time you're thinking that. And then someone says, and suddenly your devotion's gone, and it's like, well, you do it then, you know? It's like, what happened to all your devotion? You know? There was ego there too. So the goal of all these things is ultimately to merge in God. So that's why we chant our mantra constantly throughout, to maintain that remembrance, that what we're really doing this for. So including this fourth verse, Krishna in 4, 5, 6, he's giving 3 reasons why we have to stick with action. So what he says here is, you're not going to get liberation just by stopping doing things, right? So some people think that, you know, their problems are due to having a family, or, you know, having a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or having a boss who's like this or that. Krishna's saying, no, it's not like that. Just by stopping doing something doesn't mean you're going to become beyond action. So forget about that wrong notion. So the next verse he's going to say, and also it's impossible to stop action. You as a human being cannot just be free from action in the physical sense. And then in verse 6, the last verse today, he's going to say, if you stop activity, it can also be counterproductive. It can backfire. So 3 really strong reasons why you should not drop action. So here, you know, just to cover the rest of this verse, let's ask ourselves a question. So if non-performance of action, right, or if dropping action does not produce liberation, then what actions will produce liberation? Which actions produce liberation? Which actions actually produce it? Okay, I'm gonna clarify. This is a trick question. Which actions produce liberation? No actions actually produce liberation, right? Remember, the actions we're supposed to produce? Purification, right? So the action doesn't produce liberation. So the action gives liberation through purification. But let's say you do a lot of action and you get pure, and then you don't do anything else after that. You just stop there and you never actually learn who you truly are. You're not going to get liberation either. So you need both. So Amma says that you can't just, let's say you cut yourself with like a rusty nail or something, and then you just put the bandage on top of that. You know, Amma says, it's just going to get infected. You're going to get lockjaw or whatever it is, you know. So tetanus, you know. So the point is that you have to sterilize it first. You have to purify it, and then you apply the medicine or the bandage or whatever it is. So that cleaning process is what we're getting from activity, the action, if we do it with the right attitude. And then you apply the medicine of knowledge. You don't apply knowledge directly to a dirty wound. So that's another reason why that when people say you don't need to do actions, you can just jump straight to knowledge. Amma would say it's like pouring milk into a dirty vessel, it's just going to go bad. So now the next question is, this is not a trick question, because you're going to think all my questions are trick questions. How long do we perform action? How long does, I guess it's kind of a trick question. How long does any one individual perform action? How do you know how long you're supposed to perform action? When it falls away till you're done? Falls away. And so how long is that going to be for us? Yeah, there you go. What Jayshree says, it's different for everybody. That's the important thing to understand. There should never be any such thing as competitiveness in an ashram. There kind of is sometimes. Some people want to prove they can meditate longer. Some people want to prove they can work better. Some people want to, prove that they're beyond work, etc. Some people have a thing that like studying is boring, and everybody has their own little trip. But the notion of competitiveness in an ashram is really nonsensical, because people can be in an ashram for the first time ever in all their incarnations, and it can be their last time in an ashram also. Maybe that's the lifetime that they finally get liberation. Who knows? It's like you're on the, sports field. Even the beginner who's just touching a baseball for the first time in his life is there. And then the pro, baseball player is also on the same baseball field, and he's been doing it for 30 years, say. They're still on the same field. One's a complete beginner, the other one's an expert, so there's no point of comparing. So, if you want a PhD in spirituality, you have to be patient. So, like Ron said, you'll know, or someone else also said, the actions will go away on their own. So, accept that when it comes naturally. And there will be signs that you're supposed to move on. So we have to accept those signs joyfully rather than kicking and screaming. I have one example like that. I think I told you guys this story at one point. I used to be in charge of the computer room in Amrita Puri. Did I tell you that? Many, many moons ago, in the early 90s, I was in charge of the computer room. And, it was like the time for me to work there and to fix computers. And I don't know what it was. I had like this golden touch, the Midas touch. I just touch a computer and it would start working. And they were like, oh my gosh, this guy is so great. Let's, anytime you have any problem, just bring it to him, it'll work. And then at one point, every computer I touched would break. And they were like, no, you don't have to come to the computer room anymore. It was like this winning streak. I had the opposite, the negative Midas touch. It was like it would break if I touched it. They're like, no, we're fine. You don't have to come anymore. So then at that point, I thought, I guess it's time for me to move on. And after that, I think I started chopping wood in the kitchen for some time, which was nice. So as long as we have this attraction and repulsion, which we talked about before, raga, dvesha, likes and dislikes, there will always be desires. And so as long as we have desires, there's no question of dropping actions. It's impossible. So Arjuna's vasanas, or his inherited tendencies from his past life, were princely tendencies: domination, fighting, ruling. So what's going to happen if someone like that joins an ashram? What are they going to do? You think they're suddenly going to start meditating and be peaceful and get along with everybody? If you're a dominant personality, you're going to go to an ashram and you're going to dominate everybody. You're going to be like, you do this, you do that. You're going to fight, you're going to try and rule everybody like a prince or a princess. So that means they're going to create problems for others and themselves. And we do the same thing, just in our own way. We all have vasanas. We're bringing our worldly vasanas with us here into this ashram. In fact, you could say, this is kind of like a halfway house, as ashrams go, because it's not India, You know, if we were the way we are now, we might get thrown out of India. But here it's okay, it's tolerable. Everybody's got egos. We're rubbing against each other and polishing each other. Amma said that in Amrita Puri when I was there. It's like a rock polisher, you know, everybody kind of has all these sharp edges. They bump up against each other, and they come out gemstones in the end. But fortunately, anybody ever had a rock polisher before? Yeah? I love this. We used to have one too. What do you put in the rock polisher before you turn it around? You put rocks, right? What else do you put?
Abrasive.
You put an abrasive, and then that's it? Water. Right. So the thing is, I think that abrasive is the tendency in our mind, all the vasanas in our mind. But the water actually is what makes it a little more tolerable, right? It's like if there weren't water, it would be just miserable for the rocks, right? But the water softens it, makes it tolerable, so the rocks can come out, emerge stones. For us, in the ashram atmosphere, that water is Amma's love and compassion. If there were not that love and compassion, we'd be in the rock polisher without any water. It would be really difficult. So, yes?
This is I've heard it a few times, and I've never been to India.
Okay.
And you said, well, this is India, and there was, difference there in the ashram.
Mm-hmm.
And when the hot summer, when the ashram first opened, there was something
Yeah.
There was an Amma devotee there who spent a lot of time in the ashram, and he was just sharing experiences, and he said, his sense was that Amma kind of does not a lighter version here, but she treats people like more gentle here than she does in India. So again, that's a person's opinion, but
I think since for the people who are on Skype or whatever, or listening to the recording, it is the question is he's heard there's a difference between India and the West, and is Amma, according to some people, Amma's a little more goes softer on people in the West. Is that true, basically, right? Okay, so how Amma treats people, basically, or any master for that, any realized master for that matter, we can say is based partly on like the qualifications of the person and also on the kind of relationship they've established with that person, right? So there are kids who've grown up around Amma and from like just maybe since they were a baby. And basically, Amma will just tell them what to do. They'll come to Amma and say, what should I do? Should I do this or that? Should I go to engineering or law school? And then she will actually tell them, go to law school, go to med school. Whereas if you just met Amma yesterday, and you say, oh, this is convenient, I'm going to ask also. Most likely she won't say to you, you should go to med school or law school because, you should have your freedom. You just came. Why should she dictate your life to you? But if you grew up in her lap, she can say, you should do this. And she can be a little more stricter. She's got them on a shorter leash, So there is that element there. And also, they've been under her tutelage for so long, maybe she knows, or she knows anyhow, but maybe she feels it's okay to tell them more bluntly like that.
Swamiji, you learn in time there's no predicting what Amma does. You think the advice is almost diametrically opposed from one to another.
Right.
Almost without reason. There's just, you cannot predict the actions of a group.
So what I would say is that to answer your question, Amma may ostensibly be going softer on people here, but it might also be because there's a lot of new people coming for the first time, who've never met her. They're from a different culture, different background. She's a foreigner in America. So she does take a different approach for sure. And she may say something very direct, but typically, she's not strict, here at all. And in India, let's say, you grew up around Amma there as an Indian kid, she's definitely going to say something in line with the Indian culture, which she wouldn't say here. And Indian culture is by definition more conservative than America. So, and especially Kerala. where she's from. So just the cultural difference kind of accounts for the difference we see in how she treats people. Okay, let's keep moving so we can finish. So, yeah, we tend to think that we're going to automatically get peace of mind if we go somewhere where we have no responsibilities and all these problematic people and circumstances are gone. Everything's going to be fine. That's what we think. But Krishna says that's not how it works. And I might have told you, same thing happened when I went to a Zen ashram, which looked very peaceful. The Roshi there said, oh, we have problems here too. Lots of them, you know. So don't delude yourself. Verse 5. Nahi kaschit kshanam api jatu tishtatya karmakrit karyate hyavasha karma sarva prakriti jairgunaihi. Okay, verse 5. Anybody has not read yet? In the back? Give him a copy so you can read it. Verse 5, please.
No one indeed can exist even for an instant without performing action, for everyone is helplessly driven to activity by the goodness born of nature.
Okay, great. So Amma also says something very close to this, and I'm trying to remember where it was, but she says, one cannot live without being active in some way, whether physically, mentally, or intellectually. Everyone is constantly engaged in some form of action. This is an unchangeable law of nature. So she's saying the exact same thing that Krishna is saying here, pretty much. So this is the second reason that Krishna is citing. He says it's impossible to give up action entirely. You may think you're not doing action, but you really are. You know, your body is doing action. Your mind is doing action. You know, let's say I just sit here, but there's all kinds of metabolic processes going, the blood's flowing. And let's say you're a yogi and you stop all your bodily functions, but you're still on the moon, you're still on the earth, going 24,000 miles an hour or something like that, and you're circulating the sun, and all you're doing, you're doing something just by virtue of existing. So, but what Krishna is talking about in this verse is that everybody has a mental disposition of some kind. That's what he says, gunas, right? Guna just means quality. But when he talks about gunas, in the yogic context, there's three. What are they? Yes? But it's the correct order then? Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, or Tamas, Rajas, Sattva, either way. Right. So, our mind will have a prevalence of one of these. Just like the doctors, who's had their Ayurvedic constitution diagnosed before? Okay, what do they tell you? You're Kapha Vata or Vata Pitta or Pitta Vata. They tell you all this kind of stuff, right? They typically won't say you're Kapha. That's it. You know, they'll say you're two. So like that, we're not all Sattva or all Rajas or all Tamas, fortunately. We're a mixture, just like you're Kapha Pitta or something like that. So you have a mixture, but one is going to come at the front. It's going to be Kapha, Vata, Pitta, something like that. So it's going to be, probably for us, it's not Sattva, unfortunately, and it's not Tamas either. It's not purity, and it's not impurity. It's not laziness. Somewhere in between. Typically, for people who are like us in an ashram studying things like this, we're Rajas Sattva. This is what we are, basically. We're kind of just barely out of the clutches of tamas, of lethargy. Just barely. That's how you came here tonight, right? You wouldn't be here if you weren't. So it means you're active, your life is full of activity, but it's activity based on a pure notion or a pure aspiration, pure intentions. There's activity based on impure intentions also, which is typically like business, you know? It's all just and like dirty business especially, like, you know, cheating people in business. That's a perfect example of super duper activity, but for selfish purposes. So we're mostly Rajas Sattva. This is what we all are, pretty much. And that means that even if we give up physical action, the mind is still going to be mentally active, because Rajas is the predominant quality for most of us. So, you know, that's what happens. Like, you sit still in the airplane for 12 hours coming from India, then you're so restless, right? Especially kids, you know. Your mind is restless, your body is restless. You get off the plane, everybody starts running for the customs and immigration, you know. They were so restless. So Namdev, who was a great saint 700 years ago, he said they had this problem even then, even 700 years ago, they had the problem of restlessness. He said, the name of God rolls on the tongue, the japamala or the rosary rolls through the fingers, and the mind rolls all over the world. You know, so it's like, ooh, the mind is going all over the place. So he has I like that, you know, a saint with a sense of humor, you know, because it's so true. You know, typically people, after their long meditation, they immediately, I have all these things to do that I couldn't do when I was meditating, you know. So I have a long to-do list now. So the reason for why the mind is like that is given in the second half of this verse, that these three gunas compel us to do things. So they pervade the whole world. The whole world, the whole creation is pervaded by these three gunas. And if you were there for the retreat in 2013 summer, we held here, I explained how the three gunas are, the whole creation, the whole universe is made up of the three gunas. Even our intellect and even our mind is made up of the three gunas. So that means your vasanas, what are they? What are they made up of? Three gunas. Because they're the subtle body. Subtle body is the three gunas. So even your vasanas are made out of these three gunas. So like, let's say you have vasanas that look like this, you know, and there's an object out there that matches your gunas of your vasanas perfectly. Your mind is going to say, oh, this thing is so wonderful. But another guy who looks like this, he's going to say, I don't like that thing. It's no good. I want something that looks like that. Ah, this is a wonderful thing, whatever it is. So, I mean, it's not that the object is good or bad, it just means that the piece of that puzzle fit the piece of your vasanas very nicely. And as a result, your mind is so driven to activity to acquire that thing or to be in that circumstance or whatever. This is the case with food, places where people live, lifestyles, life partners. Some people love dogs, some people can't stand them. Which are dogs good or bad? They're a dog, that's all they are, you know? So this is the thing is that the gunas in our mind propel us towards these things involuntarily. We're helpless, so to speak. So you can conversely, you can tell the person's gunas of their mind based on the action they're doing, right? Unless they're a slave and being forced to do it. You know, if they're doing it of their own volition, means, you know, ostensibly of their own volition. What Krishna is saying is that it's not really of your own volition because you have these tendencies in your mind. But those tendencies affect how you choose your free will, right? You have free will. I can choose A or B, and your mind says, oh, A is so cool, we got to do that. You know, and it says B is, you know, no good, don't choose that. That's the vasanas, right? So you can tell a person's vasanas by what they're doing, with how they use their free will, basically. So it's an action, whether it's an attraction or it is a repulsion. Both of them produce an action, right? If it's an attraction, you try to get that thing. If it's a repulsion, you try to get away from that thing. But both are actions, right? So sometimes we disguise our repulsion with the name, the glorious name of inactivity. You know, I'm just not going to do anything. No, I'm just not going to do anything. I'm done with that. All it is repulsion due to a circumstance that upset us. It was a disappointment, and now we're all upset. We don't like that thing anymore. But basically, doesn't mean we're beyond likes and dislikes. If we're beyond likes and dislikes, we should be able to do it without any disturbance in our mind. That's what Amma does. She hugs sweaty people in India all day long. You think she likes that? Think she likes body odor? You think she likes it when people have like mascara like dripping down their face, melting, and she like puts it on her shoulder and then gets it all over her? It's not like she enjoys that necessarily, but she doesn't dislike it either. So if you're beyond likes and dislikes, you'll do all these things. We like to disguise it and say that we're beyond, but it's basically that we just don't want to do something. So sitting still and doing nothing is the most difficult thing, basically. For the right reasons is the most difficult thing. If you want to test whether you're really beyond likes and dislikes, try to sit still and do nothing for like 3 days. If you can do it, then we'll give you a certified beyond likes and dislikes. So what we're talking about here, and what Krishna's talking about here, is not repression. He's saying, we're going to direct the energy in the proper focus and sublimate it that way, right? So take those vasanas that you have deep down inside of you and use your rajasic energy to, in conjunction with those likes and dislikes, but do it in a sublimated way. So if you like flashy things, then do like a puja with lots of, flashy, shiny things and lots of lamps and beautiful decorations. If you like fast things, then do a lot of fast work to serve the world, If you like music, then you sing beautiful songs for God, like that. That's the idea. So use whatever your likings are and dedicate them to a higher purpose, and that way you sublimate them and you make them better. So he says, don't try to stop action, because that's suppression, right? And even if you try to suppress it, it's not going to happen. Some people who try to become swamis in the Himalayas, they'll try to live in a cave, and they think that they're done. Later you find out that they started a shop in Haridwar or Rishikesh. And now I'm selling Rudraksha malas here. Come buy from my store. And yesterday I saw in the news, there's this Indian politician, his name is actually Swami Chinmayananda. We know that the Swami Chinmayananda of great repute passed away many years ago. This guy has the same name. He's a politician. He used to be a home minister or something like that. You can't believe it. But he wears robes and he's a politician. I mean, come on. Don't deceive yourself even. Deceiving other people is one thing. You're deceiving yourself. If you're a Swami, you don't do that kind of thing. You're not supposed to run for office, right? So that means you became a Swami, but you had all these qualities in your mind that you were not capable of transcending. So what happens when you do that and it is counterproductive? That's what we're going to find out in verse 6. Karmendriyani samyamya ya aste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimudhatma mityachara sa uchyate. Okay, how about somebody, I'm sorry, what's the name again? What's your name again? Sorry? Sandra. Why don't you try reading?
He who seeks restraining the organs of action and dwelling in his mind with the objects of sense, self-deluded, he is said to be a hypocrite.
So this is a spiritual definition of a hypocrite, And this means, this is the definition of hypocrite that you can never call somebody else. You can only call yourself a hypocrite by this definition, because nobody else knows what you're thinking about. Only you know, right? Except for Amma. So this is the third reason that renunciation of action is a bad idea, because it can backfire. And it can backfire both on the individual and societal levels. So he talks about this later in the Gita, but we'll just mention it here as well. So on the individual level, you can dedicate yourself entirely to spirituality only once you have acquired the proper mental qualities, right? If you like that politician we said, you can't go become a politician until you you can't become a Swami until you have given up that desire for, politics, or desire for leadership role, or desire to be the one who changes the world, like that. So if you have that desire, it's not the right path for you to go become a Swami or to become a renunciate. Because the problem is that once you become a renunciate and you actually stop doing actions, literally stop doing actions, then if your mind cannot also become idle, truly stop, then what happens? Idle mind becomes a devil's workshop, right? So if your mind can be truly idle, it's not a problem. But the problem is that it's not really idle. It means it doesn't have anything to do, good things to do, so it does bad things, right? So if you don't give it something good to do, it's going to do bad things. So if we don't have the proper mental qualities to look within ourselves, and most people don't, this is the reality, unfortunately, then when we stop having that field of activity to exhaust our vasanas, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the world, we're going to see all the enjoyments that other people are having, quote-unquote enjoyments. Actually, if you ask them, they'll tell you it's suffering, but we think it's enjoyment because we don't get to do it, right? And so you think, oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I could have a car, my own car, my own house. And if I had a wife, she'd do my laundry, she'd cook for me, she'd tell me and say I'm great, she'd massage my feet. And then when you get married, you realize it's hogwash. But, maybe as a brahmachari, he's thinking, oh my God, I could have done all that. Look at that guy, he's got this great, setup. So that's what happens if you're not ready and you restrict yourself like that. You wish you could have a Ferrari, right? And then if you were the owner of Ferrari, I didn't tell you guys, one of the members of the family that owns Ferrari came to Amrita Puri just recently when I was there. A young woman, she doesn't even have a car. She could have 1 million Ferraris, of course. She doesn't even have a car. So obviously, it's not what it's cooked up to be. But if you are not ready and you go to the ashram, if I just got a Ferrari and just drove that around for some time, I would have been happy. So that's what happens if you're not ready. Things you can't enjoy physically anymore, you can only enjoy in your mental world, in your world of imagination. So instead of dwelling on God, your mind ends up dwelling on all these things that you didn't get to do. Sins of omission, right? They say sin of omission is the sins that you didn't do. No, I'm kidding. You were supposed to do, but you didn't do. No, it's supposed to be sins of omission, the things that you were supposed to do that you didn't do. That's a sin, right? If you're supposed to do something and you don't do it, that's a sin of omission. But if you feel that you wanted to do all these things, these naughty things, and you didn't get to do them, then you think, oh, I should have done that, I should have done that. And that, that preoccupies your mind. So it's bad for you individually because you fantasize about all those things that you didn't get to do. It's bad for society because you can't suppress it for long. It's eventually going to come out. It's going to happen. It's going to come through your actions. And then it'll create havoc in society because, especially in India, people trust, somebody who is supposedly beyond these things. And in the West, we have Catholic priests, and traditionally, there was a degree of respect shown to these people who don't have their own families and wives and children, or the nuns, because they're supposed to be dedicated totally to God. So you think, okay, I'll go confess my sins to him or her, because, they're beyond these things. But so when you find that they weren't and there are all these scandals, then you think, oh my gosh, my trust was betrayed. Same thing happens in India. You feel betrayed, and then all of society doesn't know who to believe in, what to believe in. They may even give up faith even in God. Some people do that too. So the problem is both on the societal level, on the individual level. As an individual, we're supposed to have the same qualities inside as outside. It's not just supposed to be on the surface, right? That's what he's talking about. Whatever you're doing on the surface, it has to be percolated deep within you. You have to have the qualities inside as well. I don't have time to read out those qualities, but just make a note, please, if you would. Chapter 13, verses 8 to 12. Chapter 13, verses 8 to 12 is a long list of qualities that we're supposed to have mentally. Not just superficially. It's not, like, one example is humility, right? Non-violence. So you don't just refrain from punching somebody physically. You don't punch them in your mind either. Sometimes, we're beating everybody up in our mind, and we're just not doing it physically. So they're supposed to be same on the outside as on the inside. And in Arjuna's case, he was already very famous, right, as a famous warrior. So if he had joined the path of sannyasa, renounced the world, and then made a mess of it, that would have been a big negative publicity for the whole tradition of renunciation, which is not good for society. It betrays people's trust, etc. So, again, what Krishna is talking about is transcend through proper channelization of the energy. If you can't do it through the path of renunciation, do it through the path of a householder. Raise a child, make that a spiritual practice. Exhaust your rajas through running after a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old, Do it for the sake of God. You want to raise a divine child, not someone who's going to take care of you in old age, okay? Let's make one thing clear. You're not raising children to take care of you in old age. Not raising children to take care of you in old age. Especially if you're from India, because that's the false notion that they teach you in India and also in Japan. Asia is full of notions like that. You have to have children. And when I was going to India to join the ashram, I left from Japan. I renounced to go from Japan. I can't tell you how many Japanese people said to me, and I was 23, who's going to take care of you in old age? It's like, what are you talking about? I'm 23. How do I know if I'm even going to live until old age? And let's say I have a kid. Maybe he's going to die before I die. And maybe he's not even going to like me. Maybe he's going to renounce me and he's not going to take care of me. How does having children guarantee me a secure retirement? There's no way. Somehow, some people think that. So you have children to grow and evolve and to purify yourself. It's nothing to do with the old age. So a Satguru like Amma knows how to create the right circumstances needed to remove our vasanas permanently. So for most people that means through a householder life. So the only way to really overcome all these desires and attachments and our likes and dislikes is through understanding these things better. That's why Amma says, a truer understanding of the objects is the only way to transcend them. And the example she always gives is ice cream. Everybody remember the example? Let's say you have your favorite flavor of ice cream. Vinita, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Chocolate, okay. So if Vinita has a big bowl of chocolate ice cream in front of her, and to make matters worse, she's really hungry. So what are you going to feel looking at the ice cream?
Really hungry.
You're going to think, you want to eat it? You're going to think you're going to give it to somebody else or just throw it away? You're going to dive in, right. What if, just as you're about to take the first spoonful, somebody walks up, no. The cat just peed in the ice cream. Then what's your next thought going to be? I don't care, I'm going to eat it. It's chocolate ice cream, I'm going to eat it anyhow. Are you going to do that? No. No way. No way. Even your favorite flavor of ice cream, you're just going to say, no way, I'm just going to throw it away. Because you realized what it really is. In the case of ice cream, you can't see that. It happens to have that on it. You know you're going to throw it away. So Amma says, when you understand the real nature of a thing, it makes it easier to get rid of it. So the fact that we have all these attachments to objects in the world, what does it mean? That we don't have the proper understanding of it. So the only way to transcend them is to understand the objects of the world better. That's why Amma always says, Logatande swabhavana manasalakanam. Children, you need to understand the nature of the world. She always says that over and over again. So, don't end up renouncing your renunciation. Don't, we should all be mindful that it is not an easy path. It's not the path for everybody. Just stick with where we are and mature through that, unless Amma gives you permission. So the summary of these three, and you're not a hypocrite for trying, don't forget. You're not a hypocrite for trying to transcend things, right? It's like you're not a hypocrite for trying to learn French. Let's say you can hardly speak French, and you're just trying. As long as you don't put like this bilingual translator thing on your arm saying, I can translate French, then you're not a hypocrite, because you're not claiming to be fluent either. So as long as you don't put on, the ochre robes and say, I'm beyond, and then go do mischief, you're not a hypocrite for trying to meditate, for trying to do these things. So basically, the path of renunciation is more difficult because it requires certain mental qualities that we may not have. So it's for the minority, it's not for the majority. And the world doesn't need 7 billion renunciates either. It needs only a very few of them, and needs mostly people who can keep the world going. The world's not going to stop because we have plenty of people who are ready to, live a life in the world. So the final thing, and we're already over time, sorry, I wanted to say is that there's a beautiful analogy between the flower and the fruit. So the flower and the fruit seem different, right? The flowers are on the tree, and then the fruit's on the tree, and we think of them as two different things. But if you just stop to reflect, you'll know flower and the fruit are basically the same thing, just different phases, right? So when the flower matures, it's only when the flower matures that the fruit can begin to grow. So only through the fully blossomed flower of mature performance of action does the fruit of actionlessness unfold. So the process of maturation is very gradual. It does not like the flower suddenly blossoms and immediately drops, and then the fruit is suddenly there. The flower takes time. First it's a bud, then it blossoms, then it falls, and then the fruit comes like that. So we have to understand that this is a maturation process, and the best thing is first become very good at doing actions without any attachment, and then you'll be able to transcend and go to the state of actionlessness. How do we engage in that active life? That's the big question. And Krishna's big answer comes next class, which is not next week, but I'll be in some other part of the world. I'll be in, where am I going to be? I'm going to be in Oklahoma City next week. And the week after that, I'll be here. Okay? I made these plans, unfortunately, when I didn't know I was going to have reduced time here in the ashram, so please forgive me. We'll resume the following week. I think we have to skip the questions today. You can stay after and ask them if you have them, because we are out of time. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. I'm sure. So again, sorry for going over time. Those of you who have time, you can remain for the meditation. This is the official conclusion, though. Technically, everybody, people have different schedules. Everyone's free to go if they want. If you're able to stay and meditate with us, please do so. Okay, so if you haven't already closed your eyes, please close your eyes and sit with your spine and neck straight. Slow down the breathing, breathing deeper, but naturally. As the breath slows down and becomes deeper, so also does the mind and the thoughts. They slow down and go deeper and deeper within. Try to feel Amma's presence, her subtle body here in this room, all around and within you. Even as we meditate, we still gain only glimpses of total stillness. We can experience stillness in the breathing process between each breath. As you breathe in deeply, at the end of the ingoing breath, there will be a moment of total stillness before the exhalation begins. Likewise, at the end of each exhalation, there's a moment of total stillness before we inhale. Focus your mind on these points of stillness. Experience the fullness and profundity of that moment through full awareness. having focused on these points of stillness in the breath, the thoughts also reduce and the mind becomes much more peaceful. Now allow yourself to immerse deep in the mental stillness that has been created. Now let us open our hearts and pray to Amma with the innocence and love of a small child for its mother. Oh, my beloved mother, oh Amma, this child has no refuge other than you. I am blind due to my spiritual ignorance. Please keep me safely on your lap. While my mind roams about in the world of desires, you must protect me. My mind will yearn for things due to the vasanas, but only you know what is truly good for my spiritual growth. Amma, please illumine the inner world so that my choices are always for the right things. All my actions are conducive to my spiritual growth rather than the opposite. Please be with me, holding my hand, guiding me each step of the way closer to you, Amma. Please protect this child. Now we'll chant the closing mantras. Take a deep breath. Om Asato ma Satgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnaat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath, and as you exhale, slowly open your eyes. Shivaya.